Today's conversation is first impressive because my guest became a real estate entrepreneur at the age of 18.
So I would much rather pay in money, whether that be partnering with someone, a mentor, or getting a team together, than trying to figure it out for 10 years or 15 years.
You know what's even more impressive though? How she now, 5 years later, has built a team and is employing great strategies to delegate, to manage people, and to lead them. So if you're wondering how you can go from a solopreneur or small team to really being a business owner and getting that leverage of earning money while other people work, this one is for you. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Freedom Blueprint. I'm Adrienne Green, and today we are here with my friend Alexis Morgan. Now, here on this podcast, we focus on how real estate entrepreneurs break free of the grind and create the freedom they wanted at the start. Now, Alexis is an interesting story because, Alexis, I don't know that you ever really experienced the grind. What do you think?
I think entrepreneurship in the beginning is the utmost description of the grind, not in a traditional sense, but I definitely went through a period of startup and ramping up for sure.
Okay, very fair, very fair. And yet you are unique because you really started as a real estate entrepreneur before you were ever any other business person, I believe.
That's correct. Yep. I got started in real estate at 18 years old, and I've been, doing real estate now almost 5 years, and it's been the only thing I've focused on, the only thing I've known, not coming from, traditional corporate background.
And I'm curious, you were at 18, you were in university, right? How did you get exposed to real estate as an option? Like, how did it enter your world?
It started really when I was 16. One of my friends, her father was a real estate entrepreneur working in the hotel industry, and they had massive success that you could see because of the vacations they would go on, the house that they lived in. And I was always curious, what is this family doing? What is behind the curtain? How are they making money? So that's where the curiosity sparked. But the actual action came from a book. I was in college and I picked up Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That was the formula on how to execute on that dream and that vision. And from that book, that's when I really got started. That was the exposure that I needed to know what's step one, what's step two, and what's step three to making this thing work.
I love that. And I love when we get a playbook and we can execute. Now, I believe private lending was like the first thing you did, right? Like hard money lending?
I actually, before I was a lender, I got started in the buying and selling of property, wholesaling and fix and flip. So that was the foundation before I actually went into hard money lending and private lending.
And knowing that the lending is a big piece of your world and what you focused on, how did you get into lending and why did you decide that this is the strategy you're going to run with?
Such a good question. So there's these moments in my life where mentors have left a huge imprint on me. And when I was wholesaling and flipping these houses, I was always going to events. I always wanted to learn more, get to the next level. I'm a huge learner. I'm hungry for growth. And one of the events that I went to was around syndications and funds and raising money. And there was a gentleman on stage who said, look, you all out there could be running as fast as humanly possible, spending all your energy running literally as fast as you can. But if I'm on a skateboard, a bike, a scooter, a car, I'm going to go faster and further with less effort. And he said, make sure you're in the right vehicle. And that's when it really hit me. I was like, wait a minute, I'm working really hard, but what am I working on? And from that moment, I started to look at other aspects of real estate that would allow me to have more leverage, that would allow me to go faster and further with the same or less effort. And I interviewed my developer friends. I interviewed other fix and flippers. I interviewed people who bought multifamily. I tried to get a real perspective on these other parts of real estate. And I also talked to lenders. And the lenders always seemed to have the most leverage. Deals would come to them rather than them having to do these crazy marketing strategies. They also didn't have so much of a fulfillment. Like you buy a house as a flipper, you now have to go in there and do the floors, do the paint, list it, make sure you're marketing it correctly. Lenders, their fulfillment essentially was due diligence up front, send the wire, and then you make money on and on and on. And so I was really attracted to the business model. And that was the click for me that made me switch from, fix and flipping and wholesaling to being a lender and starting to get some cash flow through that aspect. I even talked to people who own rentals. And from my understanding of their perspective, it wasn't all that it was hyped up to be, as you see online, as you might see online.
I can relate. I mean, as you know, I do primarily private lending myself as well. And it as somebody who's done, like you know, the other pieces there, I'm like, our borrower is really struggling because their contractor ghosted them. That sucks. And I have empathy for them. And I'm really glad that I'm not that flipper right now, right? I'm really glad that that's not my problem to
100%.
solve because I've been there, done that, and I'm good with not solving that problem anymore.
100%.
Now, part of the challenge in the lending space is responsibility, reputation, right? For people to trust you and for credibility. You know, you started your first investment fund at 20, right? And so how did you do that, right? Because a lot of people, they've got expertise in another industry that they're able to transfer as credibility here. What did you have to build in terms of systems and credibility for investors to trust you with their capital?
Such a good question. So a lot of people ask me, how did I do everything so young? And the honest answer, the most honest answer that I can give is that I didn't do it alone. The thing about getting started is you're going to pay in time or money, right? So I would much rather pay in money, whether that be partnering with someone, a mentor, getting a team together, than trying to figure it out for 10 years or 15 years on how to do that. How do I get an investor to trust me? How do I get a borrower to agree to my term sheet? And so the reason I was able to have success at a young age and at 20 when I launched my fund is because the first thing I did was I hired someone to teach me how to structure my fund and how to put a good deck together and how to raise money. What I will say about raising capital is it comes down to relationships, and that's something you can never buy. Since I was 18, was going to networking events. I was posting on social media. I was showing people my character, that I could perform, that I do what I say I'm going to do, that I do good work, all these sort of things that build up a positive scoreboard in the minds of people when it comes to who you are. So that you can never buy. But the technical things, I tried to fast track as much as possible. I had a partner early on who had done hundreds of fix and flips, and I used him as a way to show, like, hey, our team has in evaluating these deals, our team has experience in looking at construction budgets. Honestly, that was key to getting started and ramping up, was being the connector of it all and kind of putting together the strategy rather than figuring, I want to make as much money as possible and I want it all to myself and hopefully it works out. I was huge on, I'm willing to have 10% of a grape or 10% of a watermelon or 50% of a watermelon than 10% of a grape, and try to do this all myself without anybody's help or without anyone's insight.
Right. And that totally resonates. I know that when I was an active real estate agent and I had a real estate agent team, that was what I would work to communicate to agents to be on the team. It's like, hey, yes, you pay some to the team, but you're getting a reputation. We're bringing you leads. We're giving you operations so you can do more business and exactly have 50% of a watermelon instead of 100% of a grape kind of thing. But the truth is, a lot of people, they have a hard time internalizing that concept, right? Like, you and I get it. So how did you come to that mindset? Like, was there something that made you have this idea of like abundance and the idea that you can net more even with other people getting some as well? Or was that how you were raised? Like, how can I help other people have that mindset?
Yeah, I think someone said to me early on, the way you can get whatever you want in life by helping other people get what they want. It's the law of reciprocity. And so that was one of the core pillars that helped me develop a mindset like that, is if I want to have success and I want to raise money and I want to lend, who do I know that's doing that? And what do they want? Do they need more leads? Do they need more money? How can I help them? Because in turn, I know the law of reciprocity is almost as sure as gravity. I know in return that I can start to build some success on my own. So that was the first thing. But the second thing, which might be more important than the first, is coming back to what I said earlier. You can make money back. You can, if you lose something, if you lose money, or if you lose a t-shirt, for example, you can go and buy another one. If you cannot get time back once it's spent. And so the concept for me that I really got behind was, do I want to spend 5 years, 10 years, 15 years figuring this out and trying to do this on my own? Or am I willing to pay a mentor or split profits doing this with someone who's been doing it for 5, 10 years, who can show me the ropes and speed up my learning curve? And so those are the two mindsets I would say that have been really essential for that action to take place. Is you can't get back time. So try to cut down how much time it takes you. This is why I read a lot of books. Someone's lived a whole lifetime. They've distilled the most important lessons of their life into 100, 150 pages, and they're going to give it to you for $20. That's a steal. That is a steal all day. And so I look at mentorship that way. I look at business partnerships that way. It's someone giving you decades of experience, decades of knowledge. And those two mindsets really help me get over that hump of, wait, but it's all mine. It's all mine. Once you have the skill set, now I run my own lending business. The first 2 years I had a partner and I was doing deals with other people. Now I kind of do deals on my own, but I could have never done deals on my own this quickly if I didn't take those 2 years splitting profits and paying people out. But those years I was gaining knowledge. Now 30, 40, 50 years of lending mistakes, I know and I didn't have to make them myself because of that time. And so the time aspect has been really powerful to me, just to put in perspective, what does it actually cost?
Right, exactly. That makes sense. Now let's move from kind of like that mindset starting piece to now you've raised this initial fund and now you've got to like lend it out, right? So you're going to have to figure out underwriting, servicing, investor relations, compliance. Walk us through how you actually, lent that first, what was it, 40 million in that first raise?
Yes.
How you actually lent out that 40 million to, flippers and value add and everything that you did.
Yes.
How'd you build that out?
It's a lot. I mean, our average loan was, even still today, it's like 200,000, 210,000. So it's a lot of volume. You need a team for that to go right. And we had to start to create systems and processes. Like, you can no longer do this off the top of your head. In order for other people to come in and to keep up with that volume, keep up with demand, make sure servicing is correct, we had to create SOPs. So now in my company, there's this whole back end folder, data room essentially, on how we do business. How do we talk to investors? You have reports, which are like back looking statements, but we also track KPIs, which can project what can we expect to happen over the next couple weeks? What can we expect to happen over the course of this month? And what can we expect to happen over the course of the year? Putting projections out there, not just as goals, but actual actions towards those goals. But when it comes to the underwriting, the servicing, the processing of the loans, after the first dozen, where I realized I'm sending the same email, the same every time, I said, okay, this has got to go into a template and I'm going to bring in an assistant. And look, it wasn't easy. I've been through maybe 3 or 4 assistants. People come and go for various reasons. They work out, they don't work out. But what makes it easier, it's never going to be easier, but it does make it easier when you can onboard someone with solid systems and a book to review, rather than having to start from scratch in live verbal communication all over again.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I am very hardcore with everything that when somebody onboards, we really want to minimize the live, like you're saying, like verbal communication, the live face-to-face meetings for the repetitive stuff, right? Because that's not scalable, right? It needs to be a procedure. It needs to be a recorded video. It needs to be something like that can be rinsed and, repeated again and again, so that if you do have turnover, you have other people coming on, you're not doing this. Now, let's dive into how you grew a little bit. I understand you've got these systems now. You've got this like data bank. You've got the SOPs, the KPIs. Let's talk a little bit about how you got from the initial raise to where you are now. So let's think about what was maybe the first role that you hired for it that you initially thought only you could do. You were like, I can't hand this off. I can't hand this off. Then eventually you did hand it off. Is there something that comes to mind?
Yes, 100%. Handing off the processing was relatively easy because it's very simple. You have a checklist almost. The systems are the same, more or less, for the deals. We do the same type of loans. We're not doing crazy creative loans. But the one thing that I thought only I could do was investor relations. That is not simple. It's a relationship. You need a lot of emotional awareness and intelligence, and also a bit of sales, with a bit of you have to understand the industry because you get these difficult questions. And I was convinced I still do investor relations. That's business development. It's not like I don't do any investor relations, but the first year it was exclusively me doing investor relations. And the second year that I was lending, around January 2025, I brought in an investor relations team, 2 people that came onto my team. And I had to distill, okay, how can I make this a process? How do I talk to investors? How do I take someone from not knowing me at all to, sending a wire to our team? And slowly but surely, we created, I would have them hop on calls with me, and then they'd share their takeaways from me. And then we take my takeaways and their takeaways and distill them onto a piece of paper. And slowly but surely, we created this system for how do these calls work? What are the typical questions that we get? A frequently asked question sheet we created, a flow of how we are supposed to talk to investors. For example, one of the things that I tell my team, I meet a lot of people who are ready to invest today because of a referral, because of, maybe they saw me on stage. There's a lot of people who are ready. It's their first or second time meeting and they're ready to invest today. I used to just say, okay, great, let's do it. But now we actually slow them down because we understand the investor psychology because of reps. We slow them down and we say, well, look, we want to get to know you first, make sure this is a good fit. And that avoids any cold feet, any wishy-washiness. Like, we know all the boxes now that should be checked before someone actually sends that wire. And those processes became very clear. And it was really interesting for me to change, investor relations, this whole thing that I thought I was magical and like could close capital into a real system for closing capital, down to the copywriting that we send on our first message, to the first call, to the second call, to the email that we follow up with. All of it now has become a little bit more mathematical. Whereas in the beginning, I was like, no one can do this. Like, this is very hard. This is very advanced.
If you're a real estate entrepreneur trying to scale while doing everything yourself, there's a better way. The Time and Freedom Starter Pack gives you the exact first steps to reclaim hours each week with real support, including what to hand off, where to start, and simple tools you can put into place right away. Download it for free at adriennegreen.com/starter pack. Now let's get back to the episode. That's a great example. I love that. And I love to contrast it with what you kind of said, like the processing was easy to hand off. So there are times when something is, a relatively set process and we can bring someone into our world, into our team, and we can have, like you said before, like the SOP or something ready to go and they can plug and play. And then as we advance as leaders, as our business advances, we run into these other situations where it's like, hey guys, I know somebody else can step in and help. I don't have that system, right? Or maybe I think of what we have on some of our SOPs is like, it's not just a linear checklist. It's a flow chart, right? It's a flow chart where it can be multiple choices that can go back and repeat and everything. And I love how it's like, a collaborative process of having that new hire who's observing, seeing what they're seeing from, an outside perspective, and you and them working together to really develop that system.
100%. And I think as an entrepreneur who's trying to like scale and formalize, I had a mentor who told me, look, you don't need to pretend that you have it all figured out. Ask your team what stood out to them. You don't need to hand them something on a silver platter. Like, I used to have my team review my calls and take notes on my calls on things that they didn't know. So then I could craft exactly what a new person coming in wouldn't know. I had imposter syndrome on my first hires that I had to be perfect for my team. And a lot of times now I ask my team, like, hey, what do you think? Like, what did you think about that? Send me a report on what you took away, or what did you find most interesting? We're going into the commercial space. And so I'm sending them a lot of commercial resources and material. And I say, I want you to tell me all the things that you didn't know that you learned, and tell me all the things that stood out to you, so that now I can craft my SOP and my book of material around what a new mind coming into this looks like, rather than what I think they should know about it. So that's been huge, and a big like weight off my shoulders, but it also made me lose a little bit of ego. Like, I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to pretend that I have it all figured out. These people are coming in and trusting me to figure it out, and it's okay. It's actually better to ask for their feedback and their opinion a lot of the times. And it empowers them too. Empowers them to feel like they are making decisions and a part of the decision-making process.
Right. And the other thing that resonates there is that employees can have, I think all human beings, one of our top fears is like fear of failing, right? And so it can be so helpful when you set that expectation that like, I'm going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. We're all human beings. That's normal. We're not going to know the answers every time, but it really can make a much healthier workplace environment as well.
Yes, 100%.
You have great wisdom here about, growing a team. I'd love to talk about onboarding. So when you're bringing on new team members for whatever role, What is your wisdom or your process for onboarding look like so you can get people operating at a high level quickly?
Yeah, this is so good. So I've hired people in person and virtually. And what I found is that whether or not you're in person or virtual, the first 2 weeks to a month, I try to just spend as much time with the person. Now, obviously, I don't want to be spending time doing things that are repetitive, like teaching them something that is a system. But I do think the culture and being kind of engulfed in the culture of who our company is so important. So now my team more or less runs and we have our meetings every week. But in the very beginning, I actually did something called a virtual office where we would have a Zoom open during business hours and our team would just come in and hang out because I wanted new people to get that sense of community and to laugh and tell jokes and say, hey, what's going on with this? Hey, what's going on with that? I found that was when we were operating at the best. Honestly, now talking about it, I'm like, oh, we should bring that back. But it was such effective communication. It was almost like having a real office, but that was really valuable for me when someone's coming in to spend at least 2 weeks, but spend sometimes a month just having an open forum rather than having them shoot me an email or having calls scheduled on the calendar to check in. I would just have office hours in a way where our team would jump on a Zoom and everyone's working. Like we're not all talking, but we're available to each other. We know that we're available to each other. And that really helped as people had random questions that would come up throughout the day. I felt like it helped our culture and it helped them feel comfortable casually approaching the team with questions that they had.
Yeah, that I love that idea. It's something I don't do right now. And I have found that when I've been in groups that do like co-working calls, I forget the exact term for it, but we all like in a mastermind or something, they have an hour a week where everybody can hop on, set their goal, and you leave your cameras on and you kind of have that accountability of being there while you work. It's a little different, but there's some kind of community that comes really just from being while you guys are doing your individual work, having your cameras on and being on the same Zoom call.
Yeah.
And it does help create community. So I love that application of it. That's a new one for me. I like that, Alexis. Now, the next question, Alexis, you may not have anything that comes to mind. It's okay to be like, let's just skip that. I'm curious if there's a task or decision in your business today that you're like, I'd like to hand this off. Maybe it's something that brings your energy down or it's tedious, but you haven't delegated it yet. Is there something that comes to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. That question is easy for me, and it's the servicing. I still service all of my loans in-house, mostly because I want to pulse on what's going on. Servicing for me has provided me the opportunity to check in with my borrowers, to check in with my investors.
Right.
It's this natural touch point that happens, but I know deep down, if I want to grow this company, I cannot be collecting and sending payments every month. It's not feasible. And I'll either need to hire a third party or bring in an internal controller. That is the honest answer to that question. It's a hard one for me. I still have tug of war in my head. You could probably see it on my face that one is a hard one for me. It's hard.
Well, and that's the reality of business growth and development is there's times when you're like, I can see the pros of making this change, right? Of outsourcing or something like that. And yet I can also see the con of it too. And we as the business owner have to measure those and figure out what's the best way forward. And that's tough. It's tough. There's a lot of responsibility. It's not the same as being a W-2 employee where you just get to show up, punch that time card.
Exactly. And I think that's the real thing that happens with entrepreneurship. Just the level of decision making gets harder. You have to be more and more courageous. You have to be more and more strategic. I think those are the character traits and the skills that an entrepreneur has to continue to sharpen because you learn how to lend money. You can lend money forever. You learn how to process a loan. You can process a loan forever. You learn how to do a flip. You can flip forever. But courage, strategy, you have to always mastered it. It's always a new level of okay,
Right.
I need to be more strategic. I need to be more courageous. I need to make decisions better and faster. I do love that part because I do feel like I'm always growing there.
Right. And that's why I think certain people do so well in entrepreneurship. Like, I love how you're like, you're always learning things and I can relate to that. And if you're not in a situation, I suspect, Alexis, because I know this is how it is for me, if you're not in a situation where you always have the opportunity to learn and grow, you're probably going to get bored, right?
Yep, 100%.
So we have to stay challenged to stay engaged. Okay. So we've got a few more here, a few more questions. I love everything you've done with teams and with bringing people on so you can grow the business, so you can help more people. Now, what I wonder is what separates a team member who just executes tasks, right? Maybe like a B team player, right? They're okay. They can check off the box, from one who actually drives results for your fund, those A players. What have you seen as the difference between like the B player and the A player?
This is so good. I kind of have a two-part answer. The first one is I think you can tell right away. There is some aspect of you're either hiring an A player or a B player. You can tell from their work ethic. You can tell by the way they do their work. Is it to the best that they could do it? And there's such thing as capacity. Like someone can have the will but not have the skill, right? So that's another thing to evaluate. But I think you can see from the beginning someone's ability to perform. But the second thing that came to mind here is I do think there's an aspect of this that is due to the company culture. If you're not enforcing that proactivity is a core value of your business, then how can you expect anyone to be proactive, right? Everyone's going to be reactive. One of the core values of my company, we have 3 core values. It's integrity, it's perseverance, and it's mastery. And when I think about mastery, I think that's the core value that most likely plays into this question. Mastery means we are going to always try to be the best. That is a core value that I bring people on and I say, look, this is how we operate. The question is, we're pretty good today, but how can we be better tomorrow? We think we're great,
Right.
but how can we be greater? And I think having that be the foundation of a company, it bleeds into everything that we do. The people on my team, the people that I work with are constantly thinking what else could be done. So I think it's a 2-part. You can usually see right away, like, is this an A player or B player or C player? And how do they operate? But if you place an A player into a culture where they're punished for forward thinking, where their
Right.
ideas are not being received, where their ideas are not appreciated, with their feedback it falls on deaf ears, I think you can easily turn an A player into a B or C with a bad culture. And maybe you can even do the opposite too. You can turn a C player into someone who has initiative, who is proactive, who wants to think ahead, who wants to strategize with a positive culture that kind of encourages that mindset.
Right. I love that. I think that's a really good point, which feeds into our last question before we wrap up, Alexis. You mentioned a lot about that culture and how important it is. How do you communicate culture, your expectations, your standards to your team?
Well, we talk about it every week, so then we do beat a dead horse. It's not something
So
that we
it's a part like you say it in every team meeting, like at the beginning?
usually over the course of the week. At the end of the week, we have like a review of that week and we identify what did each person do this week to exemplify these characteristics, right? For
Wow.
example, I had an investor relations team member who did additional research to answer an investor question, and that's mastery and perseverance. I also had one time, this was something that I did, someone sent me an incorrect wire amount. We send them back what they oversent. That's integrity, right? Rather than just accepting it and kind of changing the contracts to reflect what they said. It's like, hey, this is wrong. And so we want to make sure we have the correct amounts reflected on our documents. That's integrity. We talk about the actions of those core values on a regular basis. And I think that helps the team really identify with and get behind how those shape our business. Yeah.
That's a really good point. And that's something it has to be explicit like that to really help. Great point. I love it. Now, Alexis, as we wrap up, if people would like to connect and learn more, they have a follow-up question, what is the best way for them to reach out to you?
Any platform that's out there. There's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all of them. I am at Alexis Morgan Invests. And then my email is alexis@peachstatecapital.com. If anyone wants to reach out, has questions, I'm more than happy to help.
Perfect. And if you are listening as you drive, guys, of course, all of that is in the show notes, so you can grab it there. Well, thank you so much, Alexis. There's a ton of wisdom shared today. I really appreciate you coming up and opening up like that. And for our listeners, thanks you for listening, and join me again next week for another episode of The Freedom Blueprint.